Apple didn't become a $3 trillion company by inventing the future. It got there by changing almost nothing. That sounds absurd, because Apple has spent decades convincing the world it is the gold standard of innovation. The sleek keynotes, the dramatic reveals, the mythology of genius, the promise that every launch changes everything. But if you strip away the branding, the reality is far more powerful. The iPod wasn't the first MP3 player. The iPhone wasn't the first smartphone. The iPad wasn't the first tablet. The Apple Watch wasn't the first smartwatch. And yet, Apple turned these non-original ideas into one of the greatest wealth machines in history. So the real question isn't how Apple invents. It's how Apple keeps winning without needing to. Because hidden beneath its trillion-dollar rise is a ruthless principle most people never notice. A rule so simple that once you see it, Apple's entire empire suddenly makes sense. The 0% innovation rule. The idea that true dominance doesn't come from creating new behavior. It comes from making existing behavior frictionless. Apple doesn't need to teach people what to do. It only needs to make what they already do feel easier, smoother, and impossible to leave. And that tiny difference changed business forever. To understand how, you have to go back to the moment Apple learned that pure innovation can actually be dangerous. In the 1990s, Apple was in chaos. The company had too many products, too many experiments, and no clear direction. Engineers were building features faster than customers could understand them. Product names were confusing. Experiences felt fragmented. There was plenty of invention, but there was no simplicity. And consumers don't reward complexity. They punish it. Then Steve Jobs came back, and what happened next became the foundation of Apple's modern empire. Most people think Jobs returned to make Apple more innovative. That's not what he really did. He made it more focused, he cut products, killed unnecessary lines, simplified decisions, and reduced noise. He understood something most businesses still fail to grasp. People rarely want something radically new. They want something familiar that feels magically better. That became Apple's secret weapon. Take an existing behavior, remove friction, polish the experience, control the environment, and charge a premium. Repeat. This is where Apple's real genius begins. Take the iPod. By the time Apple launched it in 2001, portable music players already existed. Other companies had already built MP3 devices, and the category was crowded. So Apple didn't invent portable music. It studied what people hated. The interfaces were ugly, storage was tiny, syncing was painful, file transfers were confusing, the software experience was miserable. The industry had built gadgets. Apple built relief. 1,000 songs in your pocket wasn't just clever marketing. It was the removal of inconvenience. That's why it exploded. Consumers didn't buy the iPod because it was technologically first. They bought it because it made music effortless. But the hardware was only the bait. The real move was iTunes. This is where Apple turned convenience into lock-in. Buying, organizing, syncing, and carrying music all collapsed into one elegant loop. Find a song, buy it instantly, sync it seamlessly, and take it anywhere. No confusion, no friction, no wasted steps. That seamlessness was so powerful that history itself got rewritten. People started acting like Apple invented the MP3 player. That's the psychological magic of the 0% innovation rule. If you remove enough pain, the market credits you with invention. But the iPod was only the beginning, because Apple was about to apply the exact same formula to the most important product of the century, the smartphone. By 2007, smartphones already existed. BlackBerry dominated professionals. Nokia ruled global sales. Palm had already introduced mobile productivity. So once again, Apple didn't invent the category. It studied the frustration. Tiny keyboards, slow browsing, clunky menus, terrible touchscreens, carrier-controlled software. The phone industry had become a mess of compromises. Apple's breakthrough wasn't the idea of a smart device. It was coherence. One slab of glass, fluid touch controls, desktop-style internet, beautiful animations, seamless media. The iPhone didn't create new behavior. It purified existing behavior. Calling, messaging, browsing, listening, and taking photos were all things people already did. Apple simply made every one of those habits smoother. And that's what made it revolutionary. This is where Apple's trillion-dollar strategy becomes obvious. Consumers don't actually pay for novelty. They pay for continuity. Once people moved their photos, contacts, messages, music, and routines into Apple's ecosystem, switching stopped being a product choice. It became emotional loss. Leaving Apple meant losing familiarity. That's why small upgrades keep generating massive demand. The better camera isn't valuable because it changes life overnight. It's valuable because it improves an already trusted ritual. The same muscle memory, the same interface, the same habits, just slightly smoother. That tiny reduction in friction compounds across billions of daily interactions. And when that happens, small upgrades become giant business outcomes. This is why predictability scales better than invention. People don't want to relearn their digital lives every year. They want the same life with fewer annoyances. Apple understood this better than anyone, and then it turned that understanding into an ecosystem. The App Store changed everything. Suddenly, the iPhone wasn't just a device. It became an environment. Apple didn't need to invent every app idea. It simply controlled the rails. Developers built the experiences. Users built the habits. Entire industries built themselves on top of the platform. But Apple owned the gateway. Every subscription, every app purchase, every in-app payment, every digital routine flowed through infrastructure Apple controlled. This is the genius of the model. The less disruptive the interface feels, the deeper the dependency grows. Users barely notice how much of their lives are being absorbed because the experience feels so natural. Apple repeated this formula again with the iPad. When it launched, critics mocked it as a giant iPhone. But that completely missed the point. Tablet computers already existed. Apple wasn't trying to invent tablets. It was trying to normalize them. Earlier, tablets demanded awkward workflows and strange compromises. Apple made the experience obvious. A bigger screen, long battery life, instant simplicity, the same gestures, the same apps. The iPad didn't teach users something new. It simply expanded habits they already had. That's why Apple users defend the ecosystem so fiercely. They aren't protecting devices. They're protecting the invisible comfort structure of their daily routines. And this is why Apple rarely rushes into new categories first. First movers often spend billions teaching consumers what a category even is. Apple waits. It lets the market normalize behavior. Then it enters later and compresses the chaos into elegance. That same logic explains products like Vision Pro. VR and mixed reality already existed. Apple didn't invent the category. It studied what people disliked: isolation, bad interfaces, clumsy controls, and gimmicky software. Then it rebuilt the experience around familiar human behavior. Eyes, hands, voice, windows, same instincts, less friction. Even in futuristic categories, Apple still follows the same ancient principle. And that's the final truth behind the 0% innovation rule.